Hello everyone, welcome to Teacher Not Preacher. This is episode number 17, I believe it is. And we are continuing discussing the letter that Jesus wanted to be given to the congregation of Thyatira. We only read the first two verses of that letter. So today what we're going to do is jump into the next verse. So that would be Revelation chapter 2, verse 20. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So, what it says is, notwithstanding I have, this is Jesus speaking again, notwithstanding I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. Okay, and that's Jesus talking to the congregation of Thyatira in a letter that he's getting John to send to them. So that's something that he sees within that congregation, something called the woman Jezebel. Okay, so that can raise a few eyebrows about who Jezebel is. What does it mean? The Bible, we are finding out in Revelation, is for the most part not literal, but mostly symbolic. So let's try to find out who Jezebel is and what it represents. Jezebel was in fact a real woman, but she lived in the 10th century BC. So we're talking hundreds of years before Jesus walked the earth, or Jesus made this letter. She was a queen to the Baal worshipping, well, she was Baal worshipping. Baal is a false god, and people still worship Baal to this day. That's the name of their god. She worshipped Baal, and she was the wife of King Ahab, who was the king of Israel at this time. And she became notorious for her murderous, adulterous, dominating ways. So she was a nasty person. We can find that in the Bible. That's just not my opinion. We'll find out. As a matter of fact, God anointed a king over Israel named Jehu, and he had Jezebel executed. She was so bad. So let's dive into this Jezebel thing here. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 31. Okay. And it says, "And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him." Okay? So that's what we're seeing, that Jezebel became the queen when she got married to King Ahab. All right, let's skip over to chapter 18. And let's look at verse 4. "For it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord." Now in other translations, it will probably say executed, because that's what cut off means. Jezebel would actually execute prophets of the Lord. So it says, "For it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water, to prevent them from getting executed by Jezebel." She was just a murderous serial killer, and she hated God's prophets. And then let's jump over to chapter 21. And what's funny to note is that she claimed that she was a prophet herself. Women, they're called prophetesses, and she claimed to be one. So that's one reason why she didn't like the real prophets. She was a false one. So if we're looking at chapter 21 here in 1 Kings, let's look at the first 16 verses. All right, this is about Naboth's vineyard. Quite the story. And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, and I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed, and turned away his face, and would eat no bread. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him, and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad, that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel, his wife, said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise, and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him, that he may die. And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles who were the inhabitants in his city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, and as it was written in the letters which she had sent unto them. They proclaimed a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And there came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him, and the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him with stones, that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Okay. So that was a pretty long passage there, but it explains just how wicked Jezebel was. Her husband was interested in some land, and God had forbid this guy that had the land and owned the land, he forbid him from giving it to anybody. It was for him and his descendants. And Jezebel did not care. She knew that her husband wanted it, and so murdering somebody in order to get it was nothing to her. There was no conscience there, so that's what she had done. She had him stoned to death, which it's got to be a horrible, horrible death. They just take you out in the middle of nowhere, and a bunch of people pick up rocks and just bash them over the person until they die. Bad way to die. Okay. So that's showing the murderous part of her. Let's also go to 2 Kings now. And let's look at chapter 9. And let's look at the first 7 verses. This is where I was talking to you about God anointing Jehu as king of Israel. And he was the one that executed, or had Jezebel executed. So we'll read about that here. 2 Kings 9, 1 through 7. And Elisha the prophet called one of the children of the prophets, and said unto him, Gird up thy loins, and take this box of oil in thine hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when thou comest thither, look out. There Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in, and make him arise up from among his brethren, and carry him to an inner chamber. Then take the box of oil, and pour it on his head, and say, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door, and flee, and tarry not. So the young man, even the young man the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead. And when he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting, and he said, I have an errand to thee, O captain. And Jehu said, Unto which of all us? And he said, To thee, O captain. And he arose and went into the house, and he poured the oil on his head, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel. And thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. All right, and then if we jump over to verse 22, and it came to pass, when Joram saw Jehu, that he said, Is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, What peace? So long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many. So here in this verse, we're seeing not only was she murderous, but she was also, it says, engaged in whoredom. So that's self-explanatory. Sometimes the Bible uses that word whore. And I think we all know what that means. She was engaged in a lot of fornication, seduction, and she was married, but apparently that didn't stop her. And it also says, Jehu also says that she was engaged in witchcraft. So she was engaged in something pagan and completely against God, witchcraft. God does not approve of witchcraft. That generally involves getting demons and evil spirits involved. Never good. So that's explaining the other parts of Jezebel. And then we jump to verse 30. We're going to start talking about the death of Jezebel. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face, and tired her head, and looked out at a window. And then verse 33, and he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trode her underfoot. Okay? So there we have Jezebel, we know, was murderous, she was adulterous, and she was engaged in idolatry, worshiping Baal, and engaging in witchcraft. So, a bad woman. And she had no claim to being a prophetess. But that doesn't mean that women were not prophetess or prophets, prophetesses. There were several of them in the Bible. Miriam, which was Moses' sister, and Deborah, they were prophetesses. We can see those examples in Exodus. Exodus chapter 15, and verses 20 and 21. I can get my pages split here. Okay. 15, 20, and 21. And Miriam the prophetess, there you go, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. This is a proclamation that she made right after God parted the Red Sea and had the Egyptians destroyed in the sea, when he had the Red Sea come back together and engulf them in the ocean. Also, if we look at Judges chapter 4 and verse 4, it says, And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. Okay, so another example. Let's go to Luke chapter 2. And let's look at verses 36 through 38. It says, And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Aser. She was of a great age, and had lived with an husband 7 years from her virginity. And she was a widow of about 84 years, which departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And she, coming in that instant, gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spake of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem. All right, and then finally, if we look in Acts chapter 21, verse 9. And the same man had 4 daughters, virgins, which did prophesy. Okay, so I just wanted to show you those scriptures to show you that women were prophetesses, just like men were prophets. It just so happens that Jezebel was not one of them. She claimed to be, but was not. So when we go back to Revelation 2:20, which is the verse we're focusing on here, what does it mean by Jezebel? Well, we know it's not talking about a Jezebel that is alive, because, well, we know which Jezebel it's talking about, but she died centuries ago when this was written. So this has to be symbolic. So likely this Jezebel is either a woman or a group of women. It could be men as well, acting as a shameless, corrupting influence in the congregation of Thyatira, getting them to engage in immorality, justifying themselves by misapplying scriptures, fornication, uncleanness, sexual appetite, hurtful desire, covetousness. It's that spirit of Jezebel that we're talking about. So it could be a specific woman in the congregation, or, like I said, it could be a group of women, or it could be men. The point is, there's something in the congregation, someone or some people that are having that spirit that Jezebel had, and they're corrupting the congregation. And more than likely, like I say, since Jezebel was known for her idolatry and fornication, that's probably what we're talking about here. That's what Jezebel was known for. So once again, we'll read that. Revelation chapter 2, verse 20. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. So there you go. It's actually, he's actually pointing out what these women or these men are doing in the congregation. It says that they are seducing those that are trying to do good, real servants of God. They're seducing them to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols, participate in idolatry. So that's what that means. That's the woman Jezebel. Okay, so I hope you learned something. Thank you very much for tuning in. And in the next lesson, we'll continue discussing this letter that Jesus wrote to the congregation of Thyatira. Until then, God bless.